ceasefire in Tigray. And Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Seleshi Bekele, calls on harnessing the Nile to achieve sustainable development in the Nile Basin. Hello and many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Dammeke Mekonnen confers with his South Korean counterpart Chang Uy-yong over the phone today on July 1st. During the meeting, Mr. Dammeke appreciated the long-standing relationship between the two countries and called on to further strengthen it. He also spoke about the unilateral humanitarian ceasefire that the government of Ethiopia has declared recently and its importance in letting farmers employ the planting season undisturbed by conflict. He also expressed his hope that the humanitarian operators in the region would exploit the opportunity created for unfettered access to scale up support to the people in the region. Although the ceasefire took many by surprise, the government of Ethiopia has been deliberating on it for a while, and the decision was made considering the inherent needs of Ethiopians for peace as expressed during the 6th general election. He finally said the international community, including South Korea, would appreciate the magnanimity of the Ethiopian government in declaring the ceasefire and discourage elements that would try to belittle it at the expense of the well-being of the people of Tigray. The South Korean foreign minister, on his part, appreciated Ethiopia's declaration on the humanitarian ceasefire and congratulated the government and people of Ethiopia for successfully conducting the 6th general election. He finally invited Ethiopia to participate in the United Nations Peacekeeping Operations Ministerial Conference that South Korea plans to host in December 2021. The Deputy Prime Minister announced Ethiopia's acceptance of the invitation and suggested that the two countries hold a high-level joint ministerial committee consultations on the margins of the conference. Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the US and other countries commend Ethiopia's unilateral ceasefire decision in Tigray region. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Dina Mufti said the government has virtually briefed the international community concerning the current situations in Tigray. Kasahun Chani has this report.
In a weekly press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Dina Mufti elaborates the Ethiopian government's law enforcement process in Tigray and the recent unilateral ceasefire decision. The spokesperson said the current situation in Tigray was virtually briefed to ambassadors of South Asian, African, Middle East, North and Latin American ambassadors. Dina stated that following the declaration of the unilateral ceasefire by the government of Ethiopia in the Tigray region, the High Government officials briefed the international community.
As you know, this week the government of Ethiopia has declared humanitarian ceasefire, unilateral humanitarian ceasefire in the northern part of the country. This had been, our ambassadors all over the world have been briefed on the content and the objective of this humanitarian ceasefire. These ambassadors were briefed in the groups, and the first ambassadors that were briefed were the group of Asian ambassadors and Australasians, our ambassador to Asia and Australasia, then our ambassadors to Africa, Europe, and Middle East were briefed in the other group, and the third group was our ambassadors to North America and Latin America. All were briefed on the very objective of the ceasefire and the content
According to the spokesperson, the African Union, China, United Arab Emirates, United Nations, United States and Sweden have welcomed the ceasefire, although some were cautious in this regard. During the occasion, Dina pinpointed a major point that all conflicting parties should strive for peace and be willing for further dialogue. Meanwhile, spokesperson Dina Mufti said the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Demeke Mekonnen, made and held discussions with the United Nations Director for Western African Division on the issues of Sudan's request to the United Nations to remove the Ethiopian peacekeepers from the disputed Abyei region.
Only in this week, the Deputy Prime Minister held discussions with the UN Director for Eastern Division, who is in charge of political and peace affairs. The discussion revolves on Ethiopian peacekeeping mission in Abyei. Particularly, the discussion dealt with the Sudanese request of ending Ethiopian peace mission in Abyei. And in these discussions, both sides have raised the fact that Ethiopian peacekeeping mission had been successful, and Ethiopia's contribution to the peacemaking is making in the region and at global level is vivid, and Ethiopia's contribution is something that has won appreciations of all sides.
Different international organizations and countries are expressing support to the latest decision for a unilateral ceasefire in Tigray. In connection with this, the UK urged all parties to pull back from the violence in Tigray and allow humanitarian workers access to the area. Russia's representative to the UN also expressed the importance of a ceasefire to create a safe humanitarian corridor. Alula Taklamariam has more from Reuters and other media outlets.
The African Union, US America, China and the United Kingdom, among others, welcomed the unilateral call for the ceasefire in Tigray. The government of Ethiopia's announcement of a unilateral ceasefire in Tigray region could be a positive step if it results in changes on the ground to end the conflict, stop the atrocities, and allow unhindered humanitarian assistance, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said in a statement. Preparing to step up relief efforts in Ethiopia's Tigray region, United Nations humanitarian staffers on Tuesday said a breakdown in communications following a ceasefire announcement leaves the situation fluid and unclear. While the Russian representative to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenza, commended the Ethiopia's government to declare ceasefire.
In what concerns Tigray, we are of course concerned with the humanitarian situation there, although we have to recognize that the bulk of humanitarian assistance to Tigray was and still is being provided by the Ethiopian government. But of course we are advocating, as others, the humanitarian access for the international organizations as well. What happened in the recent days, the unilateral ceasefire that the Ethiopian government announced gives us a light glimmer of hope, because we always said that there is no solution to any crisis which in particular is waged by military means. There is no solution to this crisis by military means, only political solution will work. How that will translate in what was happening in Ethiopia, is it a temporary lull, or is it a road which will pave the way to the political settlement? That is a question to be addressed. You know that some of our colleagues are advocating an open briefing on the situation in Ethiopia. We most probably will have it, but I must say that indeed we always say that the Security Council is to discuss situation of international peace of security and security. And there is a question which still is yet to be answered, whether the situation in Ethiopia represents a threat to international peace and security. That depends on the angle from which you look at the situation, of course. But to a large extent, of course, it is a domestic affair. And we are, yes, we do not hide it, we are in principle opponents of discussing domestic issues on the agenda of the Security Council.
Meanwhile, the African Union welcomed the decision for ceasefire. The AU chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat urged a political solution to the conflict in the Tigray region, as he reaffirmed the continued readiness of the bloc to support all Ethiopian efforts in the pursuit of peace and stability in the country. The United Kingdom also urged all parties to pull back from the violence in Tigray and allow humanitarian workers access to the area. The statement welcomes the government of Ethiopia's announcement of a humanitarian ceasefire in Tigray and urges all the parties to the conflict to make similar announcements. The violence must stop now and unfettered humanitarian access granted, added the statement.
The Ethiopian Forest and Climate Change Commission has introduced a revised climate change mitigation and adaptation strategy which envisions tackling climate change-induced disasters. The strategy is set to consume $316 billion during its implementation period, of which only 20% will be financed by the Ethiopian government. Solomon Daniel reports.
Ethiopia is among the most vulnerable countries to climate change-induced calamities across the world, despite its insignificant contribution to the global carbon emission. The country has so far been struggling with drought, locust invasion, and climate-related disasters. Developing and adapting mitigation strategies have thus been critical to the government to develop a climate-resilient economy. The Ethiopian Forest and Climate Change Commission Thursday introduced a revised climate strategy which envisions mitigating and adapting climate-related challenges. The ambitious plan is supposed to be implemented in the coming years with a total cost of $316 billion, hoping that international donors would cover 80% of the finance. As finance has always been a challenge for the country to implement its previous climate strategies, the Commission pleads donors to fully back the initiative.
The biggest challenge for Ethiopia and other developing countries is finance and technology. We have policy options, and in order to implement these policies, there is a need to have adequate finance and also technology, and the development partners, particularly the big emitters, and also countries that are pursuing fast growth economies are expected to support this type of initiative in order to address the challenge of climate change globally. So that's why we are working together in a concerted effort along with other least developed countries and the climate vulnerable forums. So developed world, particularly the big emitters and the fast growing economies are expected to support the green development path of Ethiopia and other countries.
Talking to ETV English, senior environment and climate consultant with the World Bank, Tao Tubisha said Ethiopia's remarkable effort in dealing with climate change convinces donors to cooperate.
Yeah, Ethiopia is a pioneer in the climate resilience and global environmental issues. So we appreciate that, and because as a developing country, Ethiopia committed even to contribute a lot in this initiative. So we are happy to see that Ethiopia is still leading the climate and environmental issue around the globe, even if the country is a developing country, but it commits a lot. The World Bank is already committed, and also it will be committed also to support the country, as I mentioned before, both the development and the environment initiatives.
Ethiopia plans to plant 20 billion tree seedlings by 2020 as part of its Green Legacy initiative.
The National Electoral Board of Ethiopia says it is still collecting results of the 6th general election from across the country. Chairperson of the board, Burtukan Mideksa, highlights simultaneously the board is also announcing verified election results of constituencies in several parts of the country. Chairperson Burtukan has unveiled results of some constituencies in Oromia and Amhara regions, which have already verified by the board. Burtukan said that so far no significant variation is seen between preliminary results that had been posted in areas of constituencies and votes found in ballot boxes delivered to the center. According to the chairperson, the board will announce preliminary results of 73 polling stations that the board has recently received from constituencies through the board's website. The board has so far received results of 618 out of 942 polling stations across the country. It is to be recalled that 30 political parties fielded complaints in more than 160 constituencies. Ethiopia's ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Lenj Obati, met with the Saudi Fund for Development Chief Executive Officer Sultan Al-Murshid Qahtani. During the meeting, both sides exchanged views on the relations between Ethiopia and Saudi Arabia, according to the Ethiopian embassy in Riyadh. They also reviewed the development cooperation between Ethiopia and the Saudi Fund for Development. They agreed to deepen cooperation and explore new collaboration areas with greater focus on economic development and improvement of livelihoods. Ambassador of Israel to Ethiopia, Alelin Admasu, held discussions with Ethiopian Minister of Health, Dr. Lia Taddese. The discussion focused on issues of joint COVID-19 vaccine manufacturing in Ethiopia and capacity building. They also discussed opportunities of investment in the health sector and explored ways to enhance cooperation between the Israeli and Ethiopian health ministries. Sudan's Post has reported that the head of South Sudan's Sud Institute, a national think tank based in the country's capital, Juba, has backed Ethiopia in the dispute against Egypt and Sudan over the construction of the GERD. The think tank group said Addis Ababa has full rights to use its water resources for development. Egypt and Sudan have been in dispute with Ethiopia over terms of implementation of the dam. While Ethiopia has maintained that the dam does not impact in any way the water flow to Egypt and Sudan, both downstream countries have expressed fears of decline in water shares. The think tank group underscored that Ethiopia has full right to develop the dam that is highly anticipated to benefit not only Ethiopia, but also the project has a positive spillover effect to the whole Eastern Africa region. And finally, Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the US and other countries are expressing support to the latest government's decision for a unilateral ceasefire in Tigray. Nile Equatorial Lake Subsidiary Action, an entity that works on the Nile Basin, also said it is working to integrate the region with energy. Goshu Melliso has the details.
The Nile Basin Initiative is a regional intergovernmental partnership of 10 Nile riparian countries. Ethiopia hosted the 24th Nile Lakes Subsidiary Action Plan in Addis Ababa on Wednesday.
Activities are going to prepare the feasibility.
During the event, works that have been done under the chairmanship of Ethiopia and the ongoing cooperation activities of the program were discussed. Speaking on the occasion, the Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Seleshi Bekkele, said harnessing Nile's potential helps to achieve sustainable development goals and minimize degradation in the region.
Putting water and energy development at the heart of regional transformation and river basin cooperation. It is my hope that the continued support from our respective governments to raise NELSAP's potential for water resource development and management of the Nile Equatorial Lake region will take us to achieving our mandate to poverty reduction, social and economic growth, and reversal of environmental degradation in the riparian countries, which will level up the Nile cooperation and assure SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals.
Sudanese Irrigation Minister Yasir Abbas, for his part, said the Nile Basin countries should promote cooperation to ensure mutual benefit.
Please let us not focus on the challenges of droughts, floods, water scarcity, climate change as the drivers of our cooperation in the Nile Basin, but rather look more at the missed opportunities of mutual benefits of no cooperation. Nature gave us huge resources in the basin. So let us explore the comparative advantages in our countries and think of innovative ways to complement each other for the benefit of the Nile people. I take this chance to reiterate and reaffirm the commitment of the new Sudan to cooperation in all activities of the NBI to achieve a win-win common future.
Nile Equatorial Lake Subsidiary Action, shortly NELSAP, vowed to integrate the region with energy. Ethiopia handed over its membership of NELSAP to Kenya.
You're watching Addis News Hour, a quick recap of the day's headlines. Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the US and other countries express support to the unilateral ceasefire in Tigray. And Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy, Seleshi Bekkele, called on harnessing the Nile to achieve sustainable development in the Nile Basin. And that's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha Domini. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.